Yeah, good morning, viewers. This is your regular host, Valentine. Today, we'll be talking about estimation, otherwise, put in another form, is also known as estimating. So, just this is a quick one. Once we talk about estimation, once you are talking about estimation, the rule says that we need to round first. You can see it here. Once you are estimating, you need to round first, then you can now go ahead to estimate. The question now is, when do we round? Rounding depends on the question. Take for instance, you can see this question here. It said, work out an estimate for 58.31. So first thing first, we need to round this before adding them both. So this 58, you need to round to the nearest thing, and 31, you need to round to the nearest 10. So rounding 58 to the nearest 10 becomes 60, and rounding 31 to the nearest 10 becomes 30. Now you can now add both numbers together. So 60 plus 30 will give us 90. Now the question is, what are the rules governing rounding to the nearest 10? So let's take for instance, if you are rounding 58 to the nearest 10, the rule says you need to look at the last digits. You need to look at the last digit here. So if the last digit is between 0 to 4, you round down. And if the last digit number is between 5 to 9, you round up. So take for instance, this is 58 and we are told to round this to the nearest 10. So rounding 58 to the nearest 10, we need to consider this last number here. So the last number here is 58, is 8. So the rule says that once the number is 5 and above, you round up. So this is 8 and it's more than 5. So your answer becomes, rounding 58 to the nearest 10 becomes 60. Take for 31 again. So 31, you consider the last digit here. If the last digit is between 0 to 4, you round down. And 5 to 9, you round up. So this is 1, is between 0 to 4, so we need to round down. So 31 to the nearest 10 becomes 30. Now, if you are rounding 429 to the nearest 100, if you are told to round 429 to the nearest 100, so you need to consider this last two digits here. The rule says if the last two digits is between 0 to 49, you round down. And if the last two digits is between 50 to 99, you round up. So in this case here, this is 429, rounding to the nearest 100. So this last two digit is below 50. It's between 0 to 49. So to round this to the nearest 100 becomes 400. Rounding 429 to the nearest 100 becomes 400, because this last two digits by the left is 29 and is below 50. Same as 287. 287, to round to the nearest 100. Rounding this to the nearest 100. Rounding to 87 to the nearest 100, you consider the last two digits by the left, by your right. The last two digits by your right is 87. So as usual, 87 is greater than 50 and it falls between 50 to 99. So we need to round up. So in this case, this becomes 300. Now you can now estimate both because we have 429 minus 287. So rounding 429 to the nearest 100 is 400. 287 to the nearest 100 is 300. So that will be 400 minus 300. Your final answer becomes 100. In other words, the summary of estimating is one, for you to estimate, you need to round first. You round first before doing any calculations. So let's move on to the next slide and see if there are other class activities we can have a go at. Same thing, these are questions I would like my learners or viewers to look at so that we can move on to the next slide. Now let's look at this question. In our usual manner, we'll attempt question number, because we'll attempt question number 5. And on this part, we'll attempt question number 9. Hopefully, our learners and viewers having a go at this topic or looking at this topic or revising this topic will be able to attempt the other questions that were not touched. And once they've done that, they can now move to the next slide to cross-check their answers. And I hope and wish they do this honestly so as to give them the chance to deepen their knowledge when it comes to problems involving estimation. And that will help them as we approach the exams by next month. At least that will give them more chances to pass their exams with that desired grades. So let's look at question number 5. We said Isla uses a mobile phone while abroad. She received 3 minutes of calls at 88 pence per minute. She made 7 minutes of calls at 71 pence per minute. She sent 4 text messages at 52 pence per message. The question is now saying estimate the total cost of Usla using a mobile phone while abroad. Remember what I stated earlier on. Once you have question that has to do with estimate, you don't just jump into calculation. You need to round first. Once you've rounded, then you can now do any of the mathematical manipulation that is involved. So in this case, let's start with this first statement. Say Usla received 3 minutes of calls at 88 pence per minute. So what we just need to do is to round 88p to the nearest 10. So 88p becomes, remember our rules. This is 88. And to round this to the nearest 10, you look at the last digit, which is 8. 0 to 4, you round down, and 5 to 9, you round up. So in this case, this becomes 90p times 3. So that will give us 270p, 270 pence. The next one is, oh, let me clean this. The next one is 7 minutes of calls at 71p per minute. So 71p, as usual, we look at the last digit. This is 1. The rule states that if it's between 0 to 1, between 0 to 4, you round down, and 5 to 9, you round up. So rounding this to the nearest 10 becomes 70p times 7. That will give us 490p. 490p. We look at the other digits, other statement. Said she sent 4 text messages at 52p per message. So rounding 52p to the nearest 10 becomes, as usual, you look at the last digit, which is 2. The rule says 0 to 4, you round down. 5 to 9, you round up. So rounding 52p to the nearest 10 becomes 50p times 4, which is 200. 200p. So what did the question say? It said estimate the total cost of Usla using a mobile phone. So you need to add. So you need, if you add all this together, so you'll be having 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 7 is 16. You carry 1. 2 plus 4, 6 plus 2, 8 plus 1, you carried over. That will be 9. So your final answer is 960, 960p, or if you are converting to pound, that will be £9 point 60. So I will encourage my learners or viewers in exam situations, they should be conscious of the unit of measurement. So if you are writing it in pence, we can see the right way to put it. And if you are writing in pounds, we put it this way. These are the correct format of putting the answers. Now we'll continue with the other question, which is question number 9. So let's see. The next one says, estimate the total cost of 31 television at 196 pence each, and 19 DVD players at 50.99 each. Show clearly how you obtain your answer. So the first thing first, as usual, we need to round. We need to round the values to the nearest. We need to round this to the nearest 10, and we need to round this to the nearest 100. Then we add them both. So we need to round this to the nearest 10 as usual, and we need to round this to the nearest 10 too. So rounding 31 television to the nearest 10 will be 30. So estimate the total cost of 31 television at this each. Then rounding 196.50 to the nearest 100 will give us, as usual, you consider this last digit here. Same as this, you consider the last digit here. Better still, even if you convert this and put this here, this will be 197. But remember, we are rounding to the nearest 100. So considering this, you consider the last 2 digits here, which is 96. So rounding this to the nearest 100, it becomes 200. As usual, if you want to still understand the clear picture of what we say, You can look at the previous slide. I've taken my time to talk about rounding to the nearest 10 to the nearest 100. Now you can now into your mathematical manipulation here. You said estimate the total cost of 31 television at this amount each. So you need to multiply this together. So that will be 30 times 200. 30 times 200 will give us 6,000 pounds. 6,000 pounds. Then we look at 19 DVD at 50.99 each. So 19 DVD becomes 20 if you round to the nearest 10 times 50.99 each. Rounding this becomes to the nearest 10 will give us 50. So that will be 50 times 20 will give us 1,000. 1,000. Remember the question says estimate the total cost. So you add them both. So your final answer becomes 7,000 pounds. So we've completed question 9 and question 5 here. So we encourage my learners or viewers doing personal or group revision will have a go at question number 6, 7, and 8. Once they've done that, we can now move on to the next slide to cross-check our answers. You can see we are correct here. That's good. Same as this two, we are correct here. At this juncture, we'll be concluding this aspect that has to do with estimation. And if still you struggle with any of the questions on how to go about estimating, please do well reach out to me through my comment section and I'll be more than happy and glad to help. Thank you very much. And remember, keep practicing. The more you practice, the more you get better at what you are doing and you stand a better chance to get that desired grade coming up in the exam coming up next month. Thank you very much and see you in my next session. Bye. And remember, this is your regular host, Valentine. Thank you. Bye.